Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا مولانا سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما تعلمنا يا كريم اللهم افتح علينا فتحا قريبا وبينا واسعا فتحا يليق بكرمك ورحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah, it's a pleasure to be here with everyone this morning, and I'm honored to be a part of this program. Alhamdulillah. طيب, we're going to start right off then with our hadith, our 12th hadith, Hadith Thani Ashir, from the Kitab Imam Nawawi, from the Arba'in hadith. Inshallah ta'ala, begin reading the hadith, and I'll ask someone to read it, please, in English, and then we'll continue with the commentary here, inshallah ta'ala. So, I'm going to ask that we'll probably reserve questions until the end because there's a lot of material that I want to get through here, inshallah ta'ala, okay? طيب. عن أبي هريرة بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من حسن إسلام مرء تركه ما لا يعنيه حديث حسن رواه الترمذي وغيره هكذا. So inshallah ta'ala, actually I will read the hadith and inshallah. So the hadith reads, the translation, from the perfection of one's Islam is leaving that which does not concern him. Okay, from the perfection of one's Islam is leaving that what doesn't concern him. So this is the 12th hadith, as we mentioned, of the 40, and Imam Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, he quotes Imam Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, a Maliki scholar, one of the greatest Maliki scholars, as saying that that the following four hadiths set the main concept for good manners, right, for akhlaq and behavior. And he says this hadith that we're talking about right now, so this one right here, the hadith which is after it, the 13th hadith, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه, the 13th hadith, that none of you truly believes until he wishes for his brother or loves for his brother what he loves for himself. He says it's the 15th hadith, Man kana yu'min billahi wal yawm al-akhir, and I'm right, we'll talk about this. The one who believes in Allah on the last day, let him speak good or remain silent. And the 16th hadith, which is the hadith about a man coming to the Prophet ﷺ and asking for advice, and he told him, La taghdab. Okay, so those four hadith, Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali quotes Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani as saying that these are the four hadith that set for us the principles, if you will, the main concepts for good manners and behavior in our deen. So, this hadith, in this idea of, let's go to what then the commentary of Imam Nawawi, he says regarding this hadith, he says, ما لا يهمه من أمر الدين والدنيا من فعال والأقوال. That Imam Nawawi says in his commentary that the meaning of this hadith is that that which doesn't concern him from matters in deen and worldly affairs regarding both actions and one's statements, okay? And I just want to think about that, right? Of our actions and our statements and why they are separated. And we'll come back to that towards the end of the commentary, inshallah ta'ala, because I really feel that it brings it full circle. And it's important that we look at the separation of these two things. in that Ibn Rajab, he says that a part of radiyallahu anhu, he says that a part of perfecting one's Islam is that the individual should avoid whatever actions and speech that do not concern him, limiting himself only to those actions, right, which do. Limiting themselves only to the action which do. And talking about this hadith, that the Ibn Arabi, the Maliki jurist here, said that, justifying this point that there are so many things in life that are positive and beneficial for us that we're not able to do. Right? There are so many things in life that are positive and beneficial for us that we're not able to do. He says, then why would one get involved with the unnecessary matters that are of no real concern for them in their deen and in their dunya? Right? So it's a really important point right there. It's a really important point. There's something I want to mention here. Is just an example. I thought it was quite profound. Inshallah ta'ala, you will as well. This idea of getting involved in things which are of no benefit for us, or solely for that thing as well. Look at this example here. Last week was Jum'ah. Those of you that attended Lighthouse, I gave a khutbah on the parables of Black Friday, the parable of Black Friday. That we don't have a Black Friday in our deen, but it's all about Nur. Right, so Jumu'ah, and I talked about this day, and I talked about the rush, the history, the just what is brought out inside of the human being to feel that we have to run out and take this benefit, right, from these sales, and that somehow we're not motivated in the same way to run out on the last third of the night to the masjid, right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that He is, looking for those that are forgiving Him, right? We don't have that same type of motivation. Or somehow that we're tricked that if we've missed those sales on Black Friday, that we've missed something. We've missed something grand. But we don't attribute the same value to the 2 raka'ats that we had prayed at Fajr on Friday morning. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that it is khayr min ad-dunya wa ma fiha, or the Prophet has said that it is khayr min ad-dunya wa ma fiha. It's better than the dunya and all that is in it, right? So this idea of then rushing towards something, right, just to get that new appliance or just to get that new electronic device, right? So think about that in terms of leaving that which doesn't concern them, right? Rushing to all of that in a way that it may or may not benefit me in my akhirah. And I thought about this as a friend of mine told me about a sheikh. He said that there was a sheikh that was visiting the Emirates, and those who've been to the Mall of the Emirates in Dubai, it's this grand place. We'll leave it at that. You could even go skiing inside it if you'd like to. ترك ما لا يعنيه. Leaving that which doesn't concern him in his dunya wal akhirah, skiing in the mall in Dubai, but we'll leave that. But he said the sheikh went to the mall just to make dhikr. He said, I went to the mall because I wanted to be there and be a person that is remembering Allah when all of the people perhaps are forgetting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then take it back to the hadith that the most hated place by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the market, and the most beloved place of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the masjid. Why? Not inherently, but because in the market people tend to forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they have heedlessness, and they are given over to the tijara and to the buying and the selling and all of these things. But to go there then with an intention to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, in a place where He is being forgotten, right, this is the difference now. This is the difference now. So Imam Nawawi continues, he says, وقال لأبي ذر حين سأله عن صحف وقال لأبي ذر حين سأله عن صحف إبراهيم. So here the Prophet ﷺ is asked by Abu Dharr. He's asked about what were in the suhuf, what were in the scriptures of Abraham. And he says, قال كانت أمثالا كلها. He said all of it was parables. He said all of it was parables. كان فيها أيها السلطان المغرور إني لم أبعثك لتجمع أموال بعضها على بعض. He says in it were examples such as this, or it contained a saying such as, "O leader, sultan that is deceived, I did not send you to hoard wealth. Rather, I sent you to respond on my behalf to the prayer of the oppressed." I'm sorry, on my behalf. ولكن بعثتك, he says, لترد عني دعوة مظلوم فإني لا أردها ولو كانت من كافر. And he says, continuing here, that the Prophet ﷺ told him that in this saying, that it said, "Oh, deceived leader or deceived sultan, I did not send you to hoard wealth. Rather, I sent you to respond on my behalf to the prayer of the oppressed, because indeed I do not reject supplications, even if it's from a disbeliever." Even if it's from a disbeliever. And that made me think about this, the mentioning of this hoarding of wealth, and we know what the outcome of that is, right? Suratal Humazah talks about that. وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ الَّذِي جَمَعَ مَالًا وَعَدَّدَ يَحْسَبُ أَنَّ مَالَهُ أَخْلَدَ كَلَّا لَيُنبَذَنَّ فِي الْحُطَمَةِ. So this idea of leaving which doesn't concern him, and then, so think about that, amassing wealth for the purpose of amassing wealth. Wail, some say, scholars of commentary said that it's a valley in the Jahannam. Wailul lilladhina, I'm sorry, wailul likulli humazatil lumaza, that wail in that valley for those that are, first of all, making scandals or scandalers, and then backbiting, right? Ibn Abbas on the tafsir of this, he says that humaza lumaza means the one who abuses and disgraces others in his tafsir, right? So what do? They amass wealth for this world, for the purpose of this world. Because there's a difference of amassing wealth, right? 50% of the Khulafa Rashidin were of the wealthiest of the Sahaba. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and Umar ibn Affan, right? So it's not inherently evil, but rather what we're going to do with it, right? I didn't send you here to hoard wealth, he says, right? But I sent you here for what? To be the Khalifa of Allah, right? To respond to the Da'wat al-Mazlum on my behalf, right? And then think about that, of this, of this supplication, of this person. MashaAllah. So he continues here by saying that, these, when we think about these things, when we look at this, the amassing of the wealth and the concerning of ourselves with things that are of no benefit for us in our deen, in our actions, in our sayings, that these are the characteristics of a heart that is dead. Right? Because a heart that is dead is concerned with everything other than its own salvation. A heart that is dead is concerned with everything other than its own salvation. And it has been said that from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turning His rahmah away from someone is that that person busies themselves with the faults of others. Right? That a person busies themselves with the faults of others, which prevents them from addressing the destructive issues that remain in their own souls. Prevents them from addressing, right? So they're always concerned about what someone else is doing. They're always concerned about what someone else is wearing. Always concerned about what someone else is saying. Always concerned about what someone else, but never putting the mirror up to their own face. May Allah make us of those, yes.
I would mention that also when people are like that, it prevents the group to move towards God and towards positive things. Because it's all of a sudden your attention is dwelling on negative things.
Correct. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Right. So, MashaAllah. The here, and then it made me think about this ayah here, أفلم يسيروا في الأرض فتكون لهم قلوب يعقلون بها أو أذن أو آذان يسمعون بها فإنها لا تعمى الأبصار ولكن تعمى القلوب التي في صدور. Subhanallah. That when this light goes out, right? This ayat, do they not travel through the land and see that their hearts, so that their hearts and minds may thus learn the wisdom, and that their ears may thus learn to hear, right? But it is not their eyes that are blind, but their hearts which are in their breasts. And that's what this whole idea about al-khawd fil batil, like, basically like wading into falsehoods all of the time. It's a disease of the heart, right? It's a disease of the heart, and it's not, as he said, that we're not seeing things, that we're not hearing things. We're seeing them and we're hearing them, but it's the heart that is blind. But it's the heart that's blind. Now, alhamdulillah. And on that again, this idea of the oppressor, that we should also think about this oppressor, that the tyranny that is inside of ourselves. Right? Because it's, we look at these tyrants in history and we say, well, alhamdulillah, I'm not like that person, right? So that's we kind of give ourselves a pat on the back spiritually, right? And say that we're okay spiritually, right? Alhamdulillah, I'm not like them. But there's a different reality, which is, as we said, the preoccupation that is in our preoccupation and focus on them, that we fail to notice the tyranny inside of ourselves. Right? So may Allah make us of those people who have clarity. Alhamdulillah. He says, وَكَانَ فِيهَا صلى الله عليه وسلم على العاقل ما لم يكن مغلوبا على عقله يكون له أربع ساعات. He says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that in it, again in the Suhuf of Ibrahim, of Musa, he starts off with, of Ibrahim. He says, in it also it contained that the sane person, one who is not, and he says here, maghlub ala aqlihi, and Imam Nawawi gives a sharh, meaning that someone who is, to make it very clear for you, someone that is not unconscious, not sleeping, and not insane, right? So meaning what? That you have your cognizance of you. He's saying that for that person, that they should have 4 distinct times in a day. They should have 4 moments, actually, 4 moments in every day. And then he explains what those things are. That this, then the parable, from the Suhuf Ibrahim, it says, "Sa'atan yunaji fiha rabbuhu." I'm sorry, yeah, yunaji fiha rabbuhu. Afwan. He says that the sa'a, he says that they should have a moment in which they commune with their Lord. They should have a moment in which they commune with their Lord at each day. Right? Or taking private counsel with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I was just looking, mashallah, Dr. Fadi mentioned to me, he was talking about Munaja. Oh, Munaja, you didn't see this? Sheikh Ali Juma had something just posted the other day on this, and I thought it was, mashallah, really appropriate to share here. He said that this, the meaning here of commune is that that you supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with everything that is in your heart. Right? And think about this idea of pouring out what is in your heart. And this is something that we should be doing constantly. Right? This is something that we should be doing constantly. When we were on Umrah last year, we took a trip with a group of students from the ICNYU. There's about 100 students that went on the Umrah trip. And we were talking to the students that when you get to the Kaaba, have that heart be alive. Don't get to the Kaaba and then figure out what you need to say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or don't stand in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and then figure out what you want to say. Commune with your Lord. Right? Having that conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says a time for that. So he says that it's a time that you supplicate. This is the munaja. That it's a time that you pour out your heart and you converse with Allah. Glorified and exalted is He. That you share your secrets, although He already knows them. But it's us confessing them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That you speak with Him and that you complain to Him. Because complaining to the creation is of no benefit to us, aslan, right? But we bring our complaints to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that we place our hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that we humble ourselves, right? And that humility is extended to acknowledging that everything that I have is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything I have. My being here, my studying here, the food I have here, the intellect that I've been given, all of these things are returned back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that we plead to Him and that we return all of our requests to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the one, that's the first one, that we have commune with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yunaji. And he says, وَسَاعَةً يَتَفَكَّرُ فِي صُنْعِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. Allah Akbar. And a moment in the day also, he says, a time to contemplate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the exalted's creation. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْعَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Right? In the alternation of the heavens and in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alternation of the night and the day, what is it? There are signs indeed for those of understanding. Imam Haddad, radiallahu anhu, he says, no, that the state of one's religious and worldly affairs depends upon the soundness of one's reflection. Anyone who has a share of it has a share of an abundance of good. How much is the Quran talking to us about the jibal? How much is it talking about anhar? Right? How much is it talking about nujum? How much is it talking about the rivers and the mountains and the stars? But yet, when we divorce ourselves from these things, how do we understand really what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about? If we don't involve ourselves in that thing in which He's talking about, how does it then speak to us? How does it speak to us? Sidqan, honestly. I'll share with you 3 stories of myself of some time. I like to spend a lot of time outside. 3 examples of what this means to me. One is I was in the woods one morning early, and I was in a tree. About 15 feet or so above the ground. And as I sat there just kind of looking out into the forest, the sun was just after Fajr, so it was still dark when I got there, and the sun was just beginning to rise. And I'm looking around the forest, and of course this morning symphony starts of first the birds, and then the chipmunks, and then the squirrels, and then the whole forest becomes alive. But as I was sitting there, I saw a leaf kind of float down out of my peripheral vision, and I watched it all the way to the floor of the forest. And I thought to myself of the ayat, لا تسقطوا من ورقة إلا يعلمها الله. That not a leaf falls except for in the knowledge of Allah. And then as I looked at that leaf, I looked at all of the leaf that were on the floor of the forest. And then I thought of myself in this little patch of woods. Then I thought of myself in that town. Then I thought of myself in the state. Then I thought of myself in New England. Then I thought of myself on the East Coast. Then I thought of myself, you get where I'm going? I thought of myself all the way out to earth. وَلَا تَسْقَطُ وَرَقَةٍ إِلَّا يَعْلَمَهُ اللَّهُ. And then I thought of it from the time of Adam alayhi salam to the time of Yawm al-Qiyamah. What is the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is connecting with the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in my humble opinion. The second was a time again that I was in the woods. It was dark. before Fajr this time. And again, I was in a tree. And it was a moonless night. There was no moon. It was the transition of the months, right? So it was, and it was full cloud cover. It was completely black. And as I was in the tree, I could hear animals walking around me. But I can't see a thing. I literally could not see my hand in front of my face. That's how dark it was this one morning. So I thought to myself, what will it be when I remain alone by myself with no one to assist me after I return back to my Lord? In that darkness, alone, right? It made me think of that. So this is that connecting with the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it speaks to us. And the last was an evening as I was leaving this field one night. It was November, December, I can't remember, northeast. And I prayed my Maghrib outside in this field. And there was just small patches of snow. It was cold. And I remember that when my forehead touched the ground, I made dua, oh Allah, don't let me die in a land that is cold, because the earth would be too cold on my body. So again, thinking of these things and connecting with the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So then when we understand and we walk around, we have an appreciation for the cycle that is happening, that the trees are taking in CO2 and letting out O2 for us, and we are giving shukr for that. And we're giving shukr for the grass that is growing so the animals can graze. And we're giving shukr for the sun that is shining so the process of photosynthesis can happen, that we can eat and live, right? That's when our fikr, when our ability to understand and give shukr then is for all things around us. Connecting with the moments to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. He says, وَسَاعَةً يُحَدِّثُ فِيهَا نَفْسَهُ. He says in a moment that they should have a moment to address his own soul, right? A moment to address his own soul. And we think about this in terms of muhasabah, right? So here, right, muraqabah is to make sure we don't do certain things, right? That I don't backbite and I don't make ghibah and I don't do these types of things. But then muhasabah is is why did I do it, right? Because I wanted to let myself know that I was better than so-and-so, right? So this idea of speaking to myself, why did I say that? Am I jealous of that person? Do I have envy of that person? Right? So this is the idea of speaking to our own nafs. وَسَعَةً يَخْذُو بِذِي الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. He says in a moment, when one enters into seclusion with the intention of drawing nearer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the possessor of majesty and honor. Ibn Ta'ala Skandari says that nothing benefits the heart more than spiritual seclusion, whereby it enters the domain of true reflection. Right? Again, nothing benefits the heart more than a spiritual seclusion, whereby it enters the domain of true reflection. And that periods of seclusion and isolation are necessary for spiritual health, for our own spiritual health and development. I would even say right now is just to unplug electronically as a step for people, right? As a step for people. It's concerning to me when I'm seeing students studying with an electronic device in the face of their book. If they're using it as a tool to aid them, فَلَا خَيْرٌ وَنِعْمَةٌ. Alhamdulillah. But we know ourselves, right? We know ourselves. We have to ask ourselves that question, inshallah. Can we hold that, inshallah? Yeah, shukran. So alhamdulillah. And then he says here that وَإِنَّ تِلْكَ سَاعَةٌ عَوْنًا لَهُ عَلَى تِلْكَ سَاعَةٍ. And he says that last one, this having seclusion, and time with yourself, he says, is to aid you in all of the other four that are mentioned. Right? Why? Because now I can think clearly, right? I can plan for how I'm going to address these other ones, right? How I'm going to make those a part of my life. He says it also contains وَكَانَ فِيهَا عَلَى الْعَاقِلِ مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ مَغْلُوبًا عَلَى عَقْلِهِ أَلَّا يَكُونُ سَاعِيًا إِلَّا فِي ثَلَاثٍ. He says that he said it also contained, Salam, he said it also contained that when the sane person should only move towards three things, should have three goals, he says. The first one, tazawwudu li ma'ad. He says to take provisions for the return, to take provisions for Yawm al-Qiyamah. Right? So constantly thinking about that. How is this helping me in my akhirah? How is this helping me in my akhirah? How is this helping me in my akhirah? One time I'd tell you a story in Damascus. It came to me that someone had mentioned something about me that I was upset about. And I remember speaking to Imam Zayd about it as we were in Damascus together. He said, let me ask you something. He said, does it affect your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what the person has said? I said, no. He said, does it affect your akhirah? I said, no. He said, then leave it. Then leave it. Let it be between them and Allah. So taking provisions for the return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With the thani is mu'natin lima'ash. I'm going to read this. وَلَذَّةٍ فِي غَيْرِ الْمُحَرَّمِ. He says here that, so gathering provisions for the return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we know that we're going back to that the best, Allah says in Quran, وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ تَقْوَى. Right? So then that the best provisions are taqwa. And I'm not going to go into the whole description on taqwa right now. You have the 18th hadith which is coming up. The entire hadith is on taqwa, so I'm going to leave that. But suffice to say about taqwa is that taqwa, one of my teachers explained to me, he says that taqwa from the verb waqa, to ward off, it means to ward off a blow. It's like to shield something. So that taqwa then is you warding off the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then. That's what taqwa does then. Right? As you have taqwa, it is to ward off the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah increase us in taqwa. Right? So he says here that the other two that I mentioned, he says that gaining sustenance for one's life, the three things again. So having the zad, having provisions for returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yawm al-qiyamah. The second one is gaining sustenance, right? Halal sustenance for one's life. And three, deriving pleasure from things that are not haram. Deriving pleasure from things that are not haram. And here, I'm reminded of this in the Hadith of Jibreel, that is, or not the Hadith of Jibreel, but there's a Hadith of the Messenger ﷺ said that when Allah created Jannah, right, that he said to Jibreel, go and look at it. And Jibreel went and looked at it and then came and said, oh my Lord, by thy might, no one who hears of it will fail to enter it, right? Because of all the pleasure that is witnessed in the Jannah. Allahumma ja'alna minhum. May Allah make us of those people. And then Allah surrounded it with disagreeable things and said, oh Jibreel, go and look at it. And Jibreel went and looked. And he said that he came and said, oh my Lord, by thy might, I'm afraid that no one will enter it. Because the displeasing things, and I spoke about this last week, that these displeasing things, though, are only displeasing to the untrained soul, to the undisciplined soul. But once we gain that discipline, then the raka'ats of Fajr, right? The fasting of Ramadan, they become what? They become a sweetness. They become a sweetness. Right? So I'm afraid that no one will enter it, right? Who's not willing to pay the price. And then similarly, when he created the hell, he told Gabriel to look at it, and Gabriel went and looked at it and said, "Oh my Lord, I don't think that anyone will ever want to enter it." And Allah then surrounded it with desirable things for the nafs. And Gabriel said, "My Lord, I'm afraid that no one will remain. I'm afraid that no one will remain who does not enter it." Meaning that there will be none that will not enter it because of all of the desires, right? This need to fulfill our desires. And that's what he's talking about here, deriving pleasure of things that are not haram. It continues, وَكَانَ فِيهَا, and in it, again, we're talking about the Suhuf of Ibrahim, عَلَى الْعَاقِلِ مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ مَغْلُوبًا عَلَى عَقْلِهِ يَكُونُ بَصِيرًا لِزَمَانِهِ, that he is a person that is cognizant and aware of the time in which they are living in, right? And this is something that I feel is very important for us, which to me is the vision that the founders of this college have, and the reason that why we are here. Because it's standing, right? It's responding to the needs of the time in which we are living in. Questions that are being asked, philosophical questions that are not being addressed. Questions of the existence of the Creator. These types of questions from an educated and informed and intellectual discourse on these things. To respond and help people to work through these questions. Many students that we see that are not at a school such as Zaytuna and didn't have the type of background that are coming in, get to universities and are waylaid, right? When philosophy then is introduced to them for the first time and they don't have any background. Or when a teacher with an Orientalist background will give certain ideas and theories regarding Islam. And if a Muslim doesn't have any training in this, then they are going to look at this person and say, educated at, the finest institutions on the face of the planet. Perhaps they got it right. And then confusion and shak, and that would follow. So, right, being a person that is cognizant and aware of the times that we are living in, and then what those needs are, and then responding accordingly. مقبولا على شأنه, and that this person is aware that everything has a purpose, right? And then حافظ للسانه, right? And protecting his tongue. And in the 18th hadith, which you all will study, but I just want to mention one part of it here because it's very important of this idea of this hadith, which is, right, leaving that which doesn't concern him, as we said, from actions and statements, right? Really important that we separate the two of them. Because the Prophet ﷺ was asked by one of the companions, Mu'adh ibn Jabal, when he asked him, he asked the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Nabi Allah, وَإِنَّا لَمُؤَاخَذُونَ بِمَا نَتَكَلَّمُ بِهِ فَقَالَ ثَقَلَتْكَ أُمَّكَ هل يكف الناس على وجوههم إلا حصائد ألسنتهم. That the Prophet ﷺ in this hadith, that Mu'adh ibn Jabal, he asked the Prophet ﷺ, He says that we'll be taken to task for things that we say. And the Prophet ﷺ said to him, may your mother be bereaved of you, Mu'adh. Is there anything that throws people, that casts people into the hellfire on their faces, disgraced, except for the harvests of their tongue? Except for the harvests of their tongue. Right? So, again, this idea of the tongue and what because, let's read this next part here. And it's really important here. He says here, وَمَنْ حَسِبَ كَلَامًا مِنْ عَمَلِهِ يُوشِكُ أَنْ يَقَلَّ كَلَامًا إِلَّا فِيمَا لَا يَعْنِيهِ إِلَّا فِيمَا يَعْنِيهِ. He says that, and the one who considers himself, this is, again in the Suhuf, he says, and the one who considers his speech from his actions will be quick to reduce his speech to what concerns him. Because it's easy to recognize committing sins that are an outward act, right? No one is going to argue or have difficulty when looking at some of the kaba'ir, right? Some of the enormities that exist in Islam, right? So what are the things that we're talking about here, right? Ascribing partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unjustly killing, taking of the life of a human being, actively involved in riba, lying about the Prophet, drinking, theft, suicide, learning sacred knowledge for the sake of this world, right? No one is going to argue those things or have difficulty in acknowledging them, that this is something that I should be leaving. But what happens is that when you get into the actions of the tongue, right, now it becomes a little bit more difficult to discern because of the subtleness. No, it was my right to tell that person such and such. But was it? Or was it your nafs looking for that sweetness? Looking for that one-upsmanship, as we said. No, I have to have the last word. You don't tell me, right? This is the nafs now. So then you come with that last word. And a lot of times it's associated with anger. And the Prophet ﷺ says that none of us gets angry except for they are brought to the brink of the edge of the hellfire. Right? Because of what we can say in that fit of anger. Hey, now. So alhamdulillah, something that we really should think about here in terms of just as we think about these other things, about theft and about suicide, about usury, about all these things, we also have to think about backbiting. We have to think about lying. We have to think about riyah, about showing off. We have to think about namima, of tailbiting and things that are batil and scandalous, fadiha, and all of these other things. We have to think about that from our tongue. Okay? He says, قُلْتُ بِأَبِي وَأُمِّي فَمَا كَانَ فِي صُحُفِ مُوسَى. And then Abu Dharr says, may my parents be ransom for you. He's talking to the Prophet ﷺ. What was in the scriptures of Moses? And the Prophet ﷺ said that كَانَتْ عِبْرًا كُلُّهَا. He said that all of it was moral lessons. He said all of it was moral lessons. And we find here in the surah, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَعِبْرَةً لِمَنْ يَخْشَى, right? And then the next verse, هَلْ أَتَاكَ حَدِيثُ مُوسَى. When you look at the tafsir of this in the surah, it's talking about he says that this is إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَعِبْرَةً لِمَنْ يَخْشَى, that this is a moral lesson. What is it coming about? Talking about that moral lesson, هَلْ أَتَاكَ حَدِيثُ مُوسَى. So that's the moral lesson that it's talking about there. And then it goes into the story, right, of Musa. Amen. So now here are some of the parables that are in the Suhuf of Musa, he says, alayhi salam. He says, كَانَ فِيهَا, and it contained, عَجَبًا لِمَنْ أَيْقَنَ بِالنَّارِ كَيْفَ يَضْحَكُ. He says that amazing It's amazing that one has certainty with the hellfire, yet still laughs. And I just want to clarify here that this is not an order that we have to walk around frowning for the rest of our lives. And because we have hadith of when the Prophet ﷺ smiled and laughed. Laughed to when they saw his molars, correct? We have narrations of this, right? But what we're talking about here is in the face of the realities of the dunya, right? And the important affairs of us getting through this to get home, right? That it's a serious matter. That it's a serious matter. 1. 2, he says, وَعَجَبًا لِمَنْ أَيْقَنَ بِالْمَوْتِ كَيْفَ يَفْرَحُ. He says that it's amazing that someone is aware of the dunya and all of its vicissitude, all of its changings, and that he still finds solace in it. And that he still finds solace in all of those changings. And here, this dunya, I want to read, there's a hadith here about the temptations to which the heart is exposed to. And what is that the cause of sicknesses that we have, spiritual sicknesses that are in our hearts. And they are the desires, they are the temptations of our desires and of fantasies. And this desire causes that our intentions will be corrupted, and the fantasies that we have cause knowledge and belief to falter. So Hufadh, or Hudhayfa, afwan, radiyallahu anhu, he said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah bless him and give him peace, he said that temptations are presented to the heart one by one. Any heart that accepts them will be left with a black stain. Kalla bal rana ala qulubihim. Right? They're left with a black stain on the heart. But any heart that rejects them will be left with a mark of purity. So that hearts are of two types. A dark heart that has turned away and become like an overturned vessel. And a pure heart that will never be harmed by temptation for as long as the earth and the heavens exist. The dark heart only recognizes good and denounces evil when it suits its desires and whims. Allahumma ajirna. May Allah save us from a heart like this. So when he placed these hearts into two categories, it's really that the first heart, when it is exposed to temptation, absorbs it like a sponge. A sponge that soaks up the water, leaving that heart full of black stains, as we said. And it continues to absorb each temptation that it is offered until it is darkened and corrupted, which is meant that it is like an overturned vessel. Because what happens with an overturned vessel, you can't get anything inside of it. Right? From the good. You can't get anything inside of it. I have medicine that I want to put inside of it. I can't because the vessel is upside down. You could even then think of that in terms of the word qalb itself. Right? Meaning to turn over. Ya muqallib al-qulubi thabbit qulubana ala dinik. Right? Make our hearts firm on your deen, upright, if you will, metaphorically, so that the khair and the nur can pour into it and not be overturned, so that the khair right, and the Nur pour over it. So again, just continuing here, he says, when this happens, two dangerous sicknesses take hold and plunge it into ruin. The first is that it confuses good with evil, this heart, to such an extent that it does not recognize the former and it denounces the latter. It does not recognize good and it does not denounce the latter, the evil. This sickness may even gain hold to such an extent that it believes good to be evil and evil to be good. It believes the sunnah to be bid'ah and bid'ah to be the sunnah. The truth to be falsity and falsity to be truth. The second that it does is that it sets up its desires as a judge above what Allah and His Messenger ﷺ have taught us, so that it is enslaved by its own desires. And we know the ayat. Have you not seen the one who has taken his desires as his Lord? So we ask Allah for a pure heart, a heart which is light of faith and bright from which within which radiance shines. When temptation is presented to pure hearts such as this, they impose it and reject it, so that their light and illumination only increase. Allahumma ja'alna minhum. So again here now, just in continuing, he says that he says, وَعَجَبًا لِمَنْ أَيْقَنَ بِقَدْرِ ثُمَّ هُوَ يَغْضَبُ. He says here that amazing is it the person that has conviction on the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then becomes angry. Now this is talking about complete iman. So let's be clear of that now. He's talking about complete iman, right? لا يؤمن أحدكم. I'm sorry. من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر. So we're talking about here, these are high levels of iman that we're talking about here. Because the idea, yes, saying that, he says that amazing is it the one who has complete conviction in the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then becomes angry. And he's talking about it in the sense of the anger in that you are hoping or wishing or wanting or maybe even desiring that it be something else, but it can't be. Because if it were, it would be. Does that make sense? Right? Something cannot, right? If the anger, we're getting angry over something which has already occurred, but if we believe in the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we say we have rida bima qada. We have right pleasure in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already caused to happen. So how can we become angry over it? Again, high level of iman. I'm not saying that I'm making this claim for myself. Striving and hoping and praying and begging that we could get there. But the reality is that we can't become angry because it has already happened. Right? The pens have been lifted, the paper has dried. I know. So, and he says, عَجَبًا لِمَنْ أَيْقَنَ بِحِسَابِ غَدًا وَهُوَ لَا يَعْمَلُ. And he says, it's amazing that the one who has complete conviction of the accounting, standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tomorrow, and doesn't work for it. And doesn't work for it. And I mean, for me, the easiest analogy is to think of the farmer. The farmer who is, right, desirous and hopeful of that crop, but never planted the seeds, never prepared the soil, never irrigated, never weeded, never did any of the work that was required to yield the crop, but is desirous of the crop. Kaif? Ajaban. He says, amazing. نعم. قلت بأبي وأمي هل بقي مما كان في صحفهما هل بقي مما كان في صحفهما شيء. And then Abu Dharr asked, Oh yeah, O Messenger of Allah sallallahu, is there anything from the suhuf, from the two of them, their scriptures that remain from our tradition? قال نعم يا أبا ذر. The Prophet sallallahu said, yes, Abu Dharr. There is that which exists from our tradition, within our tradition today. And then he recited, قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن ذلك لفي صحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى. The Prophet ﷺ recited from 14 to 19 of Suratal A'la and said that these last ayats, but those will prosper who purify themselves, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى, and glorify the name of their Lord, وَذَكَرَ اسْمَ رَبِّهِ فَصَلَّى, and lift their hearts in prayer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there are those that prefer the life of this world, but the hereafter is better and more enduring. And this is in the earliest revelation, in the books of the earliest revelation, the Scriptures of Abraham and Moses. Now the important thing that I find from this is that the Prophet ﷺ, that in these verses specifically that he mentioned are three things. Right? قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. So the first one, Tazkiyah. وَذَكَرَ اسْمَ رَبِّهِ, dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَصَلَّى. Right? So now dhikr, so tazkiyah, dhikr, and salat. Purifying our heart, dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and salat. Amazing. The interesting thing about this as well is that while looking at the tafsir Ibn Kathir, there is mentioning of Surat al-Najm, and I encourage you all to look at this, is the 53rd surah, and it starts from 36, the 36th ayah. Ibn Kathir brings this out, and he talks about it. The verse is, أَمْ لَمْ يُنَبَّأْ بِمَا فِي صُحُفِ Musa. Has he not been informed? And he's talking about here the disbeliever and the ayats that preceded it. Has he not been informed of what is in the scriptures of Moses? وَإِبْرَاهِيمَ الَّذِي وَفَّى, and Abraham who fulfilled his obligation. And Ibrahim who fulfilled his obligation. He says, and then the verse continues, أَلَّا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى, that no bearer of burdens will bear the burden of another. Right? And then the ayats continue. And the ayats continue. There's about 20 ayat that talk about this, about what is happening here. And at the end of it, the end of the series, the last ayah of this whole thing of what he's talking about, fi suhufi Musa wa Ibrahim, the last ayah in Suratal Najm, this is amazing. It has a sajda in it. And the last ayah is, inshallah ta'ala, after this, we'll read Subhanallah, alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah akbar, and then we'll make sajda, inshallah, after this. But there's a sajda in it. The last ayah in Suratal Najm, فَاسْجُدُوا لِلَّهِ وَاعْبُدُوا. So it's as if all of these things that he's telling you about, all of these things in the Suhuf Ibrahim wa Musa and in the Quran, and all of this message could be distilled down to this last portion right here. To prostrate to your Lord and worship Him. And if you wanted to take that and to distill that even further, would be to submit. And for me, what I thought was amazing in reading in this, and this isn't some we just want to be, inclined towards some interfaith dialogue and other things such as this. No, this is a reality because, shukran, this is a reality because the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, أفضل ما أقول والنبيون من قبلي لا إله إلا الله. The best of what I have said and the prophets before me was La ilaha illallah. And then you find the equal, you find the meanings in this, in Suratul Najm. The Prophet ﷺ is telling you that it's in Suratul A'la, and you're finding it now in this hadith, in the conversation with Abu Dharr, of the things which are exactly the same. They are exactly the same, and we haven't gotten to that yet. But listen here, he says, then I said to the Prophet ﷺ, قُلْتُ بِأَبِي وَأُمِّي أَوْصِنِي. And this is amazing as well about Abu Dharr, that, so all of this information is coming, and he's just asking to, right, zidni, like give me more, tell 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 me more. And then after I've gotten all of that, then counsel me. Because now how do I apply it? Allahumma a'limna ma yunfa'na wanfa'na bima tu'allimuna. So teach me that which is beneficial and benefit me from that which I have been taught. That's what I took from this. That he's taking all of this information, all of it, and then telling, well, how do I do with it? How do I apply it? And the Prophet ﷺ tells him, first thing he tells him, أوصيك بتقوى الله فإنه رأس الأمر كله. He says, I give you counsel to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. First thing. And I'm going to leave it at that because I said you have the 18th hadith coming up, which is about the taqwa. Okay? He says, قُلْتُ زِدْنِي. He says, tell me more. He says, عَلَيْكَ بِتِلَاوَةِ الْقُرْآنِ وَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ كَثِيرًا فَإِنَّهُ يَذْكُرُكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ. He says, then I counsel you with the reading of the Quran and remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with an abundance of reading of Quran and abundance of the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remember you, will mention you in the gathering of the heavens. Allahumma ja'alna minhum. That Allah would mention our name. That Allah would mention our name. Allah. زدني قال عليك بالجهاد فإنه رهبانية المؤمنين. He says, and here, he says, I give you counsel to striving in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and فإنه رهبانية المؤمنين. So here, one of the reasons why, again, I'm saying here that this is a comprehensive meaning of jihad here, which contains, yes, it does contain combat and fighting and other things such as that. But when you think about it here, he says it's rahbaniyatul mu'mineen. Rahbaniyah is what? It's monasticism. It's monasticism. So he's talking about all of those things that you would find of the seclusion, of the dhikr, of the caring for others, of all of those things. We don't have to take an oath of it as monks do. It's inherent inside of our tradition. فَإِنَّهُ رَهْبَانِيَّةُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. So that when we give ourselves over to these things, right? That's how that spirituality, that's how it's developed inside of us, that we don't have to seclude ourselves off into some area. Monasticism is not a part of our tradition. Being with the people is a part of our tradition. Having sabr with the people is part of our tradition. Meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with all of those trials and all of the things that we go to, that is the part of our tradition. Because as my friend told me one time, and I always keep this with me, it's easy to be a monk in the monastery. And we could change that to our tradition. It's easy to be a person of Tazkiyah in the Zawiyah. Get out into the world. Right? And now what does it look like? But when we protect ourselves and we prepare ourselves with everything that's being mentioned to us, alhamdulillah, the assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes. I'm going to try and finish this up for right here, inshaAllah. He says, "Zidni qala alayka bi sumti fa innahu matrunun lishaytan." So he said, I'll read the English then, inshallah. He says, so increase me. He says, then I counsel you to silence, because silence is a repellent for the shayateen. Silence is a repellent for the shayateen. And he says that it is an own. He says it assists you in the affairs of your deen. Silence assists you in the affairs of your deen. He says, "Qutu zidni." I said to him, "Give me more." He says, "Qul haq walau kana mur." He says, "And speak the truth even when it is bitter." Speak the truth even when it is bitter. And this is that whole idea about muhasabah again, right? Be witnesses against, even when it's against yourself. Yeah, I did it. I'm really sorry, right? But I did it, right? I apologize. It's my fault. Even when it's mur, even when it's bitter, right? But that's how we grow spiritually. That's how we mature spiritually, individually, and as a community. He says here, and again, so now he says the same thing. The Prophet ﷺ in his counsel, he tells him, he says, "Counsel me." He says, again, he says the same thing that is in the verse. He says, I'll just read the Arabic so you know it's the same thing. He says, "La ta'khudhka fillahi lawmata la'im." He says, then don't be deterred by blame that people will place on you when you're striving towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so that same language around that is being used. He says here, and then finishing, he says, retie the bonds of kinship even when people cut you off. He says, tie the bonds of kinship even when people cut you off. And he said that, again, I said, tell me more. He said, sufficient evil it is from a person to lack knowledge of themselves and concern themselves with the burden of that which does not concern him. So sufficient it is not to even know your own issues. Now you want to burden yourself with the issues of other people. And the last thing he said, Ya Abu Dharr, the last thing he said, La aqla litadbir afwan. He says that there is no, O Abu Dharr, no intelligence compares to planning, and no scrupulous compares to restraint, and no beauty compares to the beauty of good character. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all with good character. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. There is a few minutes left for any questions you may have. Alhamdulillah. I appreciate your time, alhamdulillah, and you're allowing me to be long-winded and not allowing you space for questions, but there is some time here. I'm going to go here first because you had a question before that I had asked, and if not, then we'll go to Aaron and then to Chris, and then are there any questions here? And then there's a question in the back as well too. Sure, inshallah. Okay. We'll go, yes.
When you were talking about taking spiritual seclusion and time for yourself,
Yeah.
in order that brings on reflection.
Yeah.
Just as an example, because the scripture kind of brings these into
Yeah.
real life.
Yeah.
So one experiment is when I was at college, they had outward bound seclusion.
Yeah.
Where they made you just be alone for like I think 2 days or 3 days.
Yeah.
And it was a real time of reflection because all you had to do was reflect on your past and
Right.
what you've been through, and it was very
MashaAllah.
it was something memorable or something, a marked thing that caused you to almost force you to reflect.
Yeah.
It also reminded me of the Prophet himself, when he went to the cave.
Yeah, absolutely.
That seclusion was
Absolutely.
upon revelation.
Right. And that was his practice. Sallallahu, right? It was a practice of his. Right? He would enter into seclusion for long periods of time.
And we
No, go-
and we can all do things like that in our regular everyday lives. 'Cause
Yeah.
even if you go jogging, you don't have to have like a bunch of music playing. You just have that time for
Yeah. No, it's, I mean, over here, just at Tilden or in the Strawberry Canyon. Amazing hikes right here. The base of the football stadium. You can take the stairs up into Strawberry Canyon. I've done it many times. It's a beautiful hike there. Beautiful hike. But again, my opinion, perhaps I'm biased, I know I am, but doing it, in the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because then you begin to think about things. Alam yuru ila tayri safatin yaqabidn, right? Look at these. You have turkey vultures here, you have hawks, you have other things. Think about the ayat in Suratal Mulk when Allah says, do you not see the bird with its wings outstretched and then brings them in? Ma yumsikuhunna illa rahman. Wow, how come the bird isn't falling when its wings are pulled in? Think about that. Right? Think about that. But you think about it now in the context of when you see it. Right? Go and see these things. Right? And experience them. Now.
And in those circumstances, you're in a natural balance.
Correct.
Out in nature and
Correct.
natural.
Correct. Right. Alhamdulillah. Yes, we'll go. Aaron, you had a hand up. Yes.
You said there's 4 things
Mm-hmm.
that everyone should have.
4 moments. 4 moments.
For the day of judgment. Having a halal substance. Finding pleasure in the non-haram.
Yeah. No, that was 3 only, that one. 4 was the one before it. 4 is there are 4 moments in a day one should have. That one was only 3.
Spiritual seclusion, address on the soul, their commune with Lord and then contemplate the creation. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got mixed up.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, so the question was about the 4 and the 3, so people know. So 4 moments in a day that you should have, and then 3 things that you should be striving for. Okay. Now, Yusuf, you had a question. Okay, we'll go Chris, and then here, and then here, and then here, and then the sister said yes. Okay, sorry, Chris, and then we'll go to Ash. No scrupulous like restraint. And the question was, what were the last 3 the things the Prophet ﷺ counseled Abu Dharr, and he said that there is no intelligence like planning, there's no scrupulous like restraint, and nothing, no beauty like beautiful character. Yes, Aisha. The 4, yeah. So the question is repeating of the 4. The 4 things that he mentioned here. So salam. I'm sorry, in the Sahif. Sa'at. Yeah. So the first one is communing with your Lord. The second is tafakkur fi sun'illah, contemplating, reflecting on the creation of Allah. Addressing your nafs was number 3. And moments of seclusion, number 4. Yes. Yeah. So when we think about it, one is to be because the idea of purification is one that is ongoing, right? It's inshallah ta'ala, once we make that our ghaya, our goal, then we're continually working on that, right? Then the other 2 are means of how we get to that, right? So I can be making dhikr, but perhaps I'm not making the connection, I'm not cognizant of the fact that this is in working towards purifying my soul. I'm just looking at it purely as hasanat, for example. Right? But I'm not looking at dhikr and what it can do in terms of orienting me with my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm looking at it as, a tree in paradise for every tasbih that I make, or things such as that. You see that there? So one, being conscious and cognizant of this idea of tazkiyah, and then having the means of which we arrive at that at. There was a gentleman here brother in the back, inshallah. And okay, alhamdulillah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, yes. One is. Mm. Mm. Caffeine. Yeah. 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 Yeah, interesting. That might be more of an Aqidah question. Yeah, I think I'll leave that for Aqidah, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. My apologies. MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. Yeah. Right. Right. Just correct. Correct. And perhaps a question of what is in it as to how Omar was addressing, how Omar was approaching the text itself, right? Wallahu ta'ala alam, but yes. Sayyid Abbas. Yeah, here's so mashallah, thank you. So the question was kind of but the fourth one is yuhaddith nafs fiha nafsi, right? So the fourth one is that he's addressing himself, right? So it's actually that's active, and again in this one that there's khalwa, and that's the fourth one, right? So the question is kind of differentiating between the two, between khalwa and this, and the questioner asked that, the questioner said that I've heard that there are times when absolute silence and doing nothing, thoughts and is the goal of that. And what I think about when I hear this, and also just other kind of spiritual practices as the vehicle in that, is that may be what worked for the person that was mentioning it specifically. But there is benefit, and I've heard this in terms of a goal in one state, to have nothingness, right? If we could achieve that, where thoughts cease, and there only is the existence of the one, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But again, these are very high, states, and to achieve that, I believe there has to be a greater intentionality. Allah ta'ala alam, Allah knows best, of rather than just removing oneself in a day to be able to just achieve that, because of the externalities that one may find in that, right? So kind of really a complete removal, if you will. I see these as kind of the lesser removal, if you will, in terms of our day, of unplugging, having those moments to ourselves. I think that as we move, then that becomes a goal, what you're talking about here. I just think where I'm at right now, where I see people at, just to unplug and sit down and have moments of dhikr by themselves, and not even, hey, I'm reading the weird off of my phone. Drop the phone for a moment, right? Just, drop the phone for a moment, right? Because, the nafs is, Pavlovian to a degree. That text pings when we're reading that weird, and then all of a sudden we're like squirrel, right? Anyone know I'm up? So we're distracted. The nafs is distracted, right? So again, it's just having that complete. I would like to see just that discussion and that application first, right? Because you begin then to see that those moments, the nafs fights them because it has become so inclined to that external stimulation, right? And that's a lot of times what people are fighting. I don't like being in the woods by myself. Really what they're saying, I don't like being with my thoughts. That's how I understand that. One of the, mashallah, great things from my Quran teacher, Rahimahullah, and he's still living, but he said, anytime you hear my name, I would say Rahimahullah. So he said to me, I asked him, I said, Sheikh, why is it that when people go into the woods, be they a believer, an atheist, a Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, whatever, I said they all have the same effect, that is completely soothing, and that they have an incredible experience while there. He said two things. He said, one, it's normally because it's the first time that they are acknowledging and witnessing that everything around them is in the complete submission of Allah, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of the wind and the air. So everything that is there is in complete submission and doing what it's supposed to do, one. And two, he said, it's also a time when everything around them is making dhikr. وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُونَهُ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُ. Is it not that everything is glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it is you that does not understand that glorification? So this is what I'm talking about. First, let's get to that level. And I know that people are at different levels here, but just at that level, that whole idea of removing one's thoughts is, mashallah, if we can reach that, to have an acknowledgement of the one with no thoughts, is a high level of, right? Well, alhamdulillah. Yeah, alhamdulillah. Khair, inshallah. So with that, I have the indication that we are finished with our time, mashallah ta'ala. May Allah accept us. May Allah give us khair wa tawfiq wa barakah, inshallah. May Allah make us of people that will hear this and implement it, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us a benefit for ourselves and our families and all that we love, and for the greater society. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Yes, alhamdulillah. So it reminds you, because we read the verse that has a sajda in, inshallah ta'ala, that, I would advise people, as it is from the tilawat of Quran, inshallah ta'ala, that you could find a space, inshallah ta'ala, where people are comfortable at, maybe even going up into the sanctuary, inshallah ta'ala, to make a sajda for the verse that was read, which had a sajda in it in the end of Suratal Najm.